Leonie Beaumont was standing in the middle of my kitchen at 11 o'clock on a Thursday night, wearing my old UBC hoodie and trying to convince me that the second shelf of my refrigerator was organized wrong. Her hair was half up, half down in that specific way it got when she had been running her hands through it for hours, and there was a small smear of hummus near her left wrist that she had not noticed yet. I noticed most things about Leonie that she assumed went unobserved. She had shown up 40 minutes earlier with 2 grocery bags and a look on her face that I had learned, over almost 3 years of friendship, meant she was not going to talk about whatever was actually wrong. So she was reorganizing my fridge instead. "The yogurt goes on the top shelf," she said, not asking. "It's my fridge. Your fridge is a cry for help." I leaned against the counter and watched her move things around with the focused energy of someone who needed her hands busy. Leonie worked as a structural engineer at a firm in downtown Vancouver, which meant she spent her days solving problems that had weight and consequence, and when something in her actual life felt unsolvable, she redirected that same precision toward reorganizing other people's kitchens, or color-coding my bookshelf, or, once, spending 4 hours helping me recalc my bathroom tile at 2 in the morning, after her firm lost a bid she had worked on for 6 months. She was not crying tonight. She rarely cried in front of people, including me, which I had taken a long time to understand was not distance. It was the opposite. She only kept herself that controlled around people she was afraid of losing. "The yogurt," she said again, placing it firmly on the top shelf. "Done," I said. "It lives there now." She closed the refrigerator and turned around. For a second she just looked at me across the kitchen island, and I could see the effort she was making to hold her expression steady. Then she said quiet, "Sebastien called off the engagement." I already knew. She had texted me 2 words at 9 p.m. "It's done." And I had driven to a grocery store and bought everything I knew she liked before she knocked on my door. "I know," I said. She stared at me. "How long did you know that was coming? I thought it was better for you to figure it out." She pressed her lips together. "That is an infuriating answer. I know that too." She sat down on the bar stool on the other side of the island and pulled her sleeves over her hands. Outside, the city made its usual sounds: rain on the window, a transit bus somewhere on Cambie, the particular kind of Vancouver quiet that was never actually silent. I put the kettle on without asking because she always wanted tea when she was trying not to fall apart, and she always refused to ask for it. "He said I treated the relationship like a project," she said finally. "Like I was managing it instead of living in it." I set 2 mugs on the counter. "Was he wrong?" I asked. She looked up sharply. "I'm asking," I said, not judging. She looked back down at her sleeves. "Probably not entirely," she said. "I do that. I know I do that. When things feel unstable, I make lists and timelines, and I tried—" She stopped. "I try to engineer my way out of uncertainty, and he wanted me to just be uncertain with him." "That sounds exhausting for both of you," I said. She laughed, surprised. Just a small sound, but it loosened something in her shoulders. I poured the water. She wrapped both hands around the mug when I put it in front of her. For a while, neither of us said anything, and it was not an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind we had built over years of late nights and takeout containers and long drives up to Whistler, when one of us needed to feel like the city was far away. I had met Leonie at a climbing gym in East Van almost 3 years earlier. I was there because my coworker Yusuf had dragged me and promptly given up after the first wall. Leonie was there alone, working a route that was clearly above her grade and falling off it repeatedly with the exact same frustrated focus every time. I made the mistake of watching too long. She caught me, climbed down, and said, "If you're going to stare, you might as well tell me what I'm doing wrong." I told her. She listened, tried it again, and made it to the top. She didn't thank me. She just said, "Same time Thursday," and that was how most things started with us. Not slowly, just suddenly, and then all at once. We called each other friends, because it was the accurate word, and also the safe one. I had been telling myself that for 8 months by the time Sebastian proposed to her, at a cabin, near Tofino, and she said yes. And sent me a photo of the ring before she called her mother. After the tea, we moved to the couch and watched something neither of us paid attention to. She fell asleep somewhere around midnight, with her feet tucked under her and her mug still in her hands. And I took it from her carefully, and sat there for a while in the dark, watching her breathe the way people only breathe when they finally stop performing. Okay, I covered her with the blanket from the back of the couch. She didn't wake up. I sat in the armchair across the room, and told myself, not for the first time, that the line between being a good friend and being in love with someone was a line I had chosen, and I was going to keep choosing it. That was a Thursday. On Friday, she texted me a photo of a bird feeder she was building from a YouTube tutorial and the caption, "Occupational therapy, don't ask." I didn't ask. 3 weeks later, she asked me to come to her firm's annual client gala. I was originally going with Seb, she texted. But I'm not canceling. It's the biggest event of our year, and I have 3 clients attending. And I would rather bring someone I trust than someone I have to manage. You're the least high-maintenance person I know. I stared at my phone. High praise, I wrote back. Don't push it. Dress code is cocktail. The venue is the Fairmont downtown. I'll send you the time. She sent it before I replied. That was how I found myself standing in her apartment on a Saturday evening. In November, holding a small coffret as while she stood in front of her hallway mirror in a midnight blue dress, trying to reach the zipper pull at the back of her neck with both arms at completely wrong angles. Here, I said, setting the bag down. I've almost got it. You haven't almost got it. Your elbow is pointing somewhere near your shoulder blade. She dropped her arms and exhaled. Fine. She turned around. Her hair was pinned up, a few pieces falling near her jaw in that way that was either very deliberate or completely accidental, and impossible to tell which. The dress had a long concealed zipper that ran from the base of her neck to the middle of her back, and the pull was a small silk loop that required more coordination than her current angle allowed. I stepped behind her and found the loop. Her shoulders were very still. I pulled the zipper up slowly, and I was careful, and I was professional about it, and I was also aware of the exact amount of space between us in a way that I had no business being aware of. When it clicked into place at the top, I stepped back before either of us made a point of me not stepping back. There, I said. She looked at herself in the mirror, turned slightly, checked the back. Thank you, she said. Her voice was normal, completely normal. I was the one who needed a moment. I picked up my garment bag. I'll change in your bathroom. Down the hall, she said. Don't knock anything over. The shelves are organized. They're always organized. Because I organized them. I went down the hall and changed into the suit I had not worn since my cousin's wedding in Kelowna 18 months ago, and I stood in her bathroom for a moment longer than I needed to, looking at myself in the mirror, and said nothing to my own reflection that was worth repeating. When I came back out, she was standing by the front door with her coat over her arm and her clutch in her hand, and she looked at me and said, "You clean up reasonably well." Reasonably, I said. Don't fish. Let's go. The Fairmont Ballroom was the kind of room that made you feel like you had to stand up straighter just to be in it. Chandeliers, white tablecloths. A bar that had been arranged to look like it belonged in an architectural rendering. Leonie's firm did commercial and municipal projects, and their clients were the kind of people who owned buildings rather than rented them. I had learned to talk to those people at family dinners with my father, who was a civil litigator in Ottawa, and the skill was mostly nodding at the right times and asking questions that sounded informed. Leonie transformed the second. We walked through the door, not into someone false, into a version of herself that was narrower and more precise, like a tool calibrated for a specific use. She smiled and reached and remembered names and made every person she spoke to feel like the only one in the room. I had watched her do it before, at smaller events, but at this scale it was something else. She was extraordinary at her job, and watching her work was like watching someone climb a route they had trained for years. But I also knew her well enough to see the tells. Her right hand pressed briefly to her hip when she was managing something stressful. Her smile got slightly wider when a conversation was going on longer than she wanted. She laughed a half-beat, too early, when someone's comment confused her, and she needed a second to recalibrate. I ran interference when I could. I took a plate of canapés off a server to give her a reason to step away from a conversation that had lasted 2 minutes past its natural end. I told a perfectly pleasant story about a construction timeline to a client named Douglas, who had been moving toward her with the specific energy of someone who had already had one drink too many and wanted a captive audience. I kept track of which table her clients were at, so I could point her in the right direction without her having to scan the room. At some point, near the bar, she found me. "You redirected Douglas," she said. "He seemed like he had a lot to say. He always has a lot to say." She picked up a glass of sparkling water. "He once cornered me for 45 minutes at a project close-out dinner to explain the history of Cole Harbor to me. I have worked on 3 buildings near Cole Harbor. Did you know the history? More than he did." I laughed. She almost did. Her principal, a tall woman named Renata, approached and pulled Leonie into a conversation with 2 clients, and I stepped back and gave them space. I was there, but I was not in the way. That was the whole point. I had just finished talking to someone from the structural steel supply side of things when I felt a shift in the room. Not loud. Just the particular way a social gathering registered a new presence. Sébastien Gagnon was standing near the entrance in a charcoal suit, shaking hands with someone I didn't know. He worked in commercial real estate, which meant his firm had almost certainly bought a table tonight without him needing to do anything deliberate. He had not come here for Leonie, but he was here, and he would know that she was here. I looked across the room. Leonie had not seen him yet. I watched him for a minute. He was handsome in the particular way of men who had always been told they were handsome and had organized their personality around it. He spotted Leonie before she spotted him. His expression did something brief and complicated that I did not entirely want to interpret. Leonie saw me looking at something and turned to follow my gaze. She went very still for exactly 1 second. Then she turned back to her conversation and kept talking, and if you did not know her, you would have thought nothing had happened. I knew her. Her thumb pressed once, hard, against her hip. I moved to the edge of her field of vision, just close enough that she knew I was there. She didn't look at me, but her posture eased by a degree that probably nobody else measured. The night continued. The dinner was served. The speeches were appropriately brief. Leonie moved between her clients with a focus that was almost aggressive, which meant she was working very hard not to be in her own head. Sébastien found me at the bar sometime after the 3rd course. He had that particular confidence of someone who had decided to be generous about a situation, which was the kind of confidence that made me want to leave the room immediately. "She looks good," he said, as if I had asked. "She does." He picked up his drink. "You two always at these things together?" "First time." He nodded slowly in that performance of understanding way. "She used to talk about you," he said. "You and her." He said it like there was a second half of the sentence he was deciding whether to add. I looked at him. "She's good at maintaining important relationships," he said. "That's one of the things I respected about her. She just..." He paused, swirled his glass. "She has a hard time letting people see when she needs something. You probably know that." There it was. A piece of truth turned into a warning label. Leonie did hold things close. She did redirect vulnerability into productivity. She did have a harder time asking for what she needed than almost anyone I knew. But that was not a flaw to be catalogued by someone who had decided to leave. She also drove 4 hours to Kelowna when my father had a cardiac event last spring, I said, and sat in a hospital waiting room with me for 6 hours, without asking once if I wanted her to stay. She just stayed. He looked at me for a moment. Then he nodded, not warmly, and moved away. I found Leonie 20 minutes later, in a small side room off the main ballroom, where the venue stored backup chairs and extra linens, and, apparently, one structural engineer, who needed 90 seconds of silence. She was standing near a window, looking at the street below, her arms crossed, her expression, doing the thing it did when she was running calculations she didn't like the outcome of. "He talked to you," she said, without turning around. "Briefly. What did he say?" "That you have trouble letting people see when you need things." She was quiet for a moment. "He's not wrong." "No," I said. "But he said it like a reason, and it wasn't his reason. He left because he wanted something different, and that's okay. But he doesn't get to reduce you to a personality flaw he couldn't work around." She turned from the window. Her eyes were steady, but I knew the effort that took. "I'm tired of tonight," she said. "We can leave after the principal says goodbye to the last client." "How long do you think that is?" 20 minutes. She pressed her eyes closed briefly. "Okay. I want to tell you something," I said. She opened her eyes. "I said it because I didn't want it sitting between us, like something Sebastian got to name before I did. I'm not here tonight because you needed a warm body in a suit. I'm here because when you texted me it's done 3 weeks ago, I was already in a grocery store, buying miso soup and those crackers you like. Because I knew before you texted that you were going to need to eat something at midnight and not talk about it. And I have been doing that kind of thing. Knowing what you need before you say it. Showing up before you ask. For almost 3 years. And I am not saying that to be credited for it." She was very still. "I'm saying it," I said, "because I think you know, and I think we've both been calling it friendship, because it was the word we agreed on, and I don't want to keep pretending. That's the whole truth." The room was quiet, except for the distant sound of the ballroom and the rain starting again on the window. Leonie looked at me for a long moment. "You drove to Kelowna in 4 hours," she said. 3.5, I said. Highway was clear. Her mouth moved at the corner. "That is the most you thing you've ever said." Right in the comments, was Leonie right to wait as long as she did? Or should she have said something before one honest night made it unavoidable? She stepped toward me, and she was the one who closed the distance. "I should have said this months ago," she said quietly. "Maybe longer than months. You're saying it now." She reached up and straightened the lapel of my jacket, even though there was nothing wrong with it. Her fingers stayed there for a moment. "I've been very good," she said, "at treating us like a structure I was maintaining. Checking the load-bearing points. Making sure nothing shifted. I waited. I think I was scared," she said, "of what happened if it did shift." She looked up at me. "It's already shifted, hasn't it?" "It has," I said. "For a while." She exhaled slowly. Then she kissed me, in a back room full of banquet chairs, with the Vancouver rain on the glass, and the gala winding down 40 feet away, and it felt nothing like a structural failure. It felt like the opposite of one, like something that had been holding tension for a long time finally finding its proper load path. When we pulled apart, she rested her forehead against mine for a second. "Celia is going to say something insufferable about this on Monday," she said. "I thought Renata was your boss. Celia is my project manager. She has been telling me for 8 months that I look at you like a site plan I keep returning to. That is an extremely specific thing to say. She works in structural. We express things differently." I laughed and she laughed into my shoulder, and for the first time all night I felt her actually relax. Not perform relaxing. Actually stop holding herself at that careful, controlled angle. We went back into the ballroom. She made her last rounds with clients, shook hands with Renata. And I helped 2 servers carry a tray of glasses back toward the kitchen. Because they were short-staffed, and it seemed like the obvious thing to do. When I came back, Leonie was standing near the coat check, her jacket on, watching me cross the room. Her expression was the open kind that she reserved for very few people and very few moments. "You are," she said when I reached her, "genuinely the most useful person I have ever let into my life." Let in? Invited in. You know what I mean. I took her coat from her hands and helped her put it on. She let me. Outside, the rain had lightened to the Vancouver kind that wasn't quite drizzle. The kind that lived in the air, rather than falling through it. We walked to where I had parked on Georgia Street, and somewhere between the hotel entrance and the cars. She took my hand without announcing it. In the direct way, Leonie did everything. Like a decision she had made and was now implementing. The drive back to her apartment was quiet. The city at midnight had its particular look. The amber of the streetlights, on the wet pavement, the North Shore mountains invisible behind cloud. The bridges lit up in their slow reflection on the inlet. She kept her hand in mine across the console. Every red light felt longer than usual. At her building, I walked her up. Same elevator, same hallway, same slightly uneven carpet near her door that she had complained about to the property manager twice, without result. She unlocked the door and turned on the entry light and set her clutch on the small table by the door. Then, she turned her back to me. "The zipper," she said, without preamble. I stepped behind her and found the loop. My hands were steadier this time, but everything else was louder. The small sound of the mechanism, the warmth of her neck near my fingers. The way she held very still, but not stiffly. I pulled the zipper down slowly, halfway, and paused. "That first time," I said quietly, "in your hallway, when I did this." She was quiet for a moment. "I knew," she said, "what I was doing when I asked you. You didn't make it easy to be professional about." "I know," she said. "I wasn't trying to." I finished the zipper and took a small step back, giving her space to turn around. When she did, her expression was the unguarded version. The one I trusted most. 3 years, she said. Give or take. She reached for my tie and pulled me toward her. Not hard, just firmly, in the way she did everything she had decided on. She kissed me first. 2 months later, Celia sent me a very formal email through Leonie's work address with the subject line "Site Plan." The body of the email contained only a small illustration of a building blueprint with a red heart drawn in marker over the foundation. Leonie said she was embarrassed. She framed it and put it on the shelf above her desk. I pretended not to notice. She knew I noticed. That was how most things worked between us. Now with the right name on them at last.